And I lucked out. I don't know, some of you older guys might know Charlie West. He was a D-back and a punt returner for the Vikings. He was my high school D-back coach. He taught me more about footwork and playing defense and kind of seeing a play develop beforehand than I had ever learned from a lacrosse coach up to that point. So I thank him all the time. I see him whenever I go home to New York, and he was probably my biggest defensive influence until I went to Johns Hopkins and got to learn from Coach Petramala. But the footwork and seeing the field and having the game slow down, that didn't happen from me playing lacrosse when I was in 4th grade until now. That happened because I was playing other sports the whole time. Obviously not snowboarding, but anything else slows the game down, which is why I always encourage my guys. And I look out my defense this year, I have a ton of football and hockey players. And that toughness kind of comes out when they play, and the game is starting to slow down a little bit for them, which is something that's very cool for me to see. So I would definitely encourage you guys to play both sports. And I know all the Division I coaches, they love multi-athletes. I know Don Starger, my brother, got to play for at Virginia. He recruited defenseman Matt Kelly. Never saw him play lacrosse. He looked at his high school highlight tape for football because he was Mr. Illinois football. And then another player like Chris LaPierre, who was just the 3rd pick in the draft this year, he was New Jersey Mr. Football. It's another guy. He saw his football tape and said, I know this guy can be a lacrosse player. I'm taking him. And those guys were both standouts, and LaPierre still is a senior this year. So the mix, it's there and it works. Now more talk about defense. I want to talk about on-ball defense. This is high school, this is youth, and one thing I did find is for you high school coaches, never feel like it's too elementary to break it down all the way to the beginning, right? A lot of these guys, you don't know where they came from, you don't know who coached them before, and it's not enough just to say, all right, let's do some one-on-ones, right? Break it down before that, slow it down, especially now before the season starts. My 2 words for my defensemen are feet and hips. Your feet and the guy you're covering, his hips. That's all you need to know. And Coach talked about having a short stick. That's the greatest thing for them. Sometimes we don't even let them use a stick. Every once in a while, if we're doing one-on-ones, it's all their feet and their hips, and the guy they're covering hips. It works for me. It's great because I have a lot of linemen that play defense. They think that's the natural thing. I'm going to be a defenseman because I'm a lineman. When they start playing one-on-one without their stick, everything they do is up high, in the chest, on their arms, all right? If you're going against somebody, and I'm probably the smallest defenseman in the MLL, I can't go, upper body against upper body and someone like Paul Rabel, and I'm gonna get run over every single time I try to cover somebody like that. But a person's hips, that's their center point, that's their balance when they're playing defense. Doesn't matter how big and strong they are, you can push their hip, and that's gonna knock them off their balance. So I'm always telling my guys to sit low and work your hands and get them on their hips all the time. And if you give them a shorty, whether it's up top or below, I love it behind the goal. I especially like it up top because you're not going to drive somebody's upper body while they're running full speed at the goal and think that you're going to push them wide. But if you get into their hips and start driving them, you're going to be able to drive them away from the goal. And what I tell my guys is I stay a half step behind them if they're dodging from up top. I'm a long stick midi. I like to keep my stick on the guy's back with my hands on his hips, a step behind him so he can never roll back top side, and I just drive him down the side. If he wants to keep running behind the goal, that's completely fine. We're taking away the goalie's angle, right? We're taking away his shot, his angle to shoot. This is what I meant there. So have your guys sit low and focus on the offensive man's hips all the time. That's where their hands should be all the time. They will never get a penalty, even if their hands are wide across each other. Never seen a cross check called when the guy's working an offensive man's hips. But once those hands start riding up into the shoulder, eventually goes to the neck, that's when those penalties start flying all the time. But if they're sitting working those hips, that's where they want to be. That's where they're going to be able to drive and get some power. What I love about it is you can't drive somebody's hips unless you're sitting low in a nice, powerful defensive position. And that's another great key about that. When the defenseman's standing up, his hands are going to go up into the chest, into the neck, and those are obviously penalties, and you're out of balance. But if you're sitting low in a powerful stance, you'll be able to work that guy's hips. That's why I'm always telling my guys, move your feet, work their hips. I was going to talk about the one-on-ones with the short stick. Tony already covered that. And then eventually, with the younger guys and the high school guys, let them know that using a long pole is a privilege, all right? You graduate to the long pole. It's not just something, oh, I'm going to play defense, I get a long pole, I'm just going to start beating people up. Because offensive guys, they're smart. They play offense, they score goals, they know what they're doing. You watch Brendan Mundorf play attack, that guy drives to go harder than anyone I've ever seen, and a couple whacks on his shoulder or his arm, that's not going to stop him. All right, and these guys, they're getting much better. So when you finally let them use that stick, their long pull, which is a privilege, and make sure they know that, everything's got to be lifts up. I always tell my guys, slap down, lift up. You see the big hard slaps all the time. They're always coming down with the big check. All they have to do is wind back up. Those seconds to wind back up, that's when an attackman drops his shoulder and runs right through him. If you slap down, now come back up at the lift. It's already there, it's below their glove. You get up underneath them, you get an attackman off his balance, and what's wide open once you lift the guy's hands up is hip. And now you drive the hip. Slap down, lift up, drive his hip. So that's what I'm always trying to get my guys to do. If they slap down and wind up again, take the pole right out of their hands. Slap down, lift up, slap down, lift up, hip gets wide open, you start driving.
So what he's talking about, and I couldn't reinforce this more, is that you're coming down and then you're getting under here and lift up. There's not an attackman or a midfielder, including Paul Rabel, who can do anything in the world right now. He can't. He's got to probably take his hand off his stick and use one hand, because you've taken that away. So, I mean, it is the best check in the world. And how do you get it down? I see too many kids do this after they slap down. How do you get it? You go in here, and then you go up. And that's not a bad thing to do, by the way.
How was that again?
And probably you heard him. So, you know, it's just a great way to get there, yes.
Can you guys show what you're talking about pushing the hips?
Yes. So the first thing, the first thing I always tell my guys is when they're sitting in their low D stance, is that they need to be able to hop around on their feet, right?
Right.
If the guy's on his toes, he can't hop. If he's on his heels, he can't hop. On the balls of your feet, sitting nice and low, you should be able to move around just like that.
Right.
Have that nice balance, all right? Now, if I'm standing up, I can't get a check down on Tony's hip here. I have to be in that low stance all the time. And this is where I'm working. It doesn't matter how wide my hands are, all right? Refs are not going to call a cross check if you're all the way down here. Even in Colorado, the refs will not call that cross check if you're working all the way down there. Well, maybe they will. But that's where you want to work. And the great thing about that, the lift check is the most effective check in the game. All right? And the best part about it is when you lift up, now that whole hip is completely exposed. The whole thing's showing, and then you start driving.
Are you just talking about driving? There you go. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Right there, right on that hip. And I always, what I do with young guys, older guys, doesn't matter. If I see a youth player that's, you know, a pretty big, strong kid, I'll just say, don't let me push you over. All right, I'll have him stand there real strong, and I'll try to push his shoulder as hard as I can and see if he moves at all. And normally he doesn't budge, or he might move a little bit. Then I'll say, okay, don't let me push you over, and he'll stand there, and then I'll just give one good push on his hip, and it gives out like that, and he falls over. So that's a good way to show them, let them do that to you, and then they can see, oh, I can actually push this guy over if I drive his hips. Okay. So that's one way that I like to show them when I do that.
And like Matt said, what 95% of the time, what happens is you start coming up. But I'll tell you what, this is a great place to hold somebody just right under his armpit. And what it does, it prevents you from going up here and getting that penalty. But this is a great place, so this is one
and that's him driving towards you right now.
Yeah, because you said you're half a step behind somebody, right?
Yeah, if I'm playing proximity from up top,
yeah.
I like to stay a half step behind him and just drive his hips. That way he can't roll back to the middle field. I'm always keeping him down the side. I don't want to let him get top side. And then the great thing about the lift is you get the bottom hand off their stick. They got one hand on their stick, they're not a threat anymore. All they can do is cradle. They can't shoot unless they're John Grant Jr. and they can't pass. That's some time for the older guys. That's when I let them start throwing some checks once they get the bottom hand off their stick. Because, you know, good offensive player, he's got two hands on his stick, he's just going to run right through those checks. He's going to power cradle right through there. But now he's a little bit more vulnerable once you get that bottom hand off. So that's the only time I want my players to throw checks. I wasn't even going to talk about checks that much, but that's that one vulnerable time. I'm always trying to get the guys and stay engaged in the guy. Once you get his hand off, don't drive his hip and push him away, because all he's going to do is step away, get his hand back on his stick, and then attack you again. So once you get into that hit, just keep driving them wide, and don't let him get that bottom hand back on.